said, if it were true. But the Forsaken are still bound. She glanced at Moiraine, looking troubled for an instant before she schooled her features. Even if the seals are weakening, the Forsaken are still bound. Lanfear, in the old tongue, Daughter of the Night. Nowhere was her real name recorded, but that was the name she had taken for herself, unlike most of the Forsaken who had been named by those they betrayed. Some said she had really been the most powerful of the Forsaken, next to Ishamael, the betrayer of hope, but had kept her powers hidden. Too little was left from that time for any scholar to say for certain. With all the false dragons that are appearing, it is not surprising someone would try to bring Lanfear into it. Moiraine's voice was as unruffled as her face, but inside herself she roiled. Only one thing for certain was known of Lanfear beside the name. Before she went over to the Shadows, before Luz Theron Telamon met Ilyena, Lanfear had been his lover.
Little turret ball in
A
it.
complication we do not need. The Amerlin seat frowned as if she had had the same thought, but Theron nodded as if it were all just words. Other names are clear too, Mother. Lord Luke, of course, was brother to Tigraine, then the daughter heir of Andor, and he vanished in the Blight. Who Isam is, or what he has to do with Luke, I do not know, however. We will find out what we need to know in time, Moiraine said smoothly. There is no proof as yet that this is prophecy. She knew the name. Isam had been the son of Brean, wife of Lane Mandragoran, whose attempt to seize the throne of Malkir for her husband had brought the Trolloc hordes crashing down. Brean and her infant son had both vanished when the Trollocs overran Malkir, and Isam had been blood kin to Lan. Or is blood kin. I must keep this from him until I know how he will react, until we are away from the Blight. If he thought Isam were alive... The Watchers wait on Toman Head, Varen went on. There are a few who still cling to the old belief that the armies Arthur Hawkwing sent across the Areth Ocean will return one day, though after all this time, she gave a disdainful sniff. The Domier Avron, the Watchers over the waves, still have a... community is the best word, I suppose, on Toman Head, at Falma, and one of the old names for Arthur Hawkwing was Hammer of the Light. Are you suggesting, daughter, the Amerlin seat said, that Arthur Hawkwing's armies, or rather their descendants, might actually return after 1,000 years? There are rumors of war on Almuth Plain and Toman Head, Moiraine said slowly. And Hawkwing sent 2 of his sons as well as armies. If they did survive in whatever lands they found, there could well be many descendants of Hawkwing.
Get my coffee real quick before I do a dab.
The Amerlin gave Moiraine a guarded look, obviously wishing they were alone, so she could demand to know what Moiraine was up to. Moiraine made a soothing gesture, and her old friend grimaced at her. Varen, with her nose still buried in her notes, noticed none of it. I don't know, Mother. I doubt it, though. We know nothing at all of those lands Arthur Hawkwing set out to conquer. It's too bad the sea folk refused to cross the Areth Ocean. They say the islands of the dead lie on the other side. I wish I knew what they meant by that, but that accursed sea folk close-mouthedness. She sighed, still not raising her head. All we have is one reference to lands under the shadow, beyond the setting sun, beyond the Areth Ocean where the armies of night reign. Nothing there to tell us if the armies Hawkwing sent were enough by themselves to defeat these armies of the night, or even to survive Hawkwing's death. Once the War of the 100 Years started, everyone was too intent on carving out their own part of Hawkwing's empire to spare a thought for his armies across the sea. It seems to me, Mother, that if their descendants still lived, and if they ever intended to return, they would not have waited so long. Then you believe it is not prophecy, daughter? Now, the ancient tree, Varen said, immersed in her own thoughts. There have always been rumors, no more than that while the nation of Almuth still lived, they had a branch of Avendasora, perhaps even a living sapling. And the banner of Almuth was blue for the sky above, black for the earth below, with the spreading tree of life to join them. Of course, Taraboners call themselves the Tree of Man and claim to be descended from rulers and nobles in the Age of Legends. And Domani claim descent from those who made the Tree of Life in the Age of Legends. There are other possibilities, but you will note, Mother, that at least 3 center around Almouth Plain and Toman Head. The Amerlin's voice became deceptively gentle. Will you make up your mind, daughter? If Arthur Hawkwing's seed is not returning, then this is not prophecy, and it doesn't matter a rotted fish head what ancient tree is meant. What I know, Mother, Varen said, looking up from her notes, and leave the decision in your hands.
Had to
I
clean up a little bit of a
believe the last
mess.
of Arthur Hawkwing's foreign armies long ago, but because I believe it does not make it so. The time of change, of course, refers to the end of an age, and the great lord, the Amerlin slapped the tabletop like a thunderclap. I know very well who the great lord is, daughter. I think you had better go now. She took a deep breath and took hold of herself visibly. Go, Varen. I do not want to become angry with you. I do not want to forget who it was had the cooks leave sweet cakes out at night when I was a novice. Mother, Moiraine said, there is nothing in this to suggest prophecy. Anyone with a little wit and little knowledge could put together as much, and no one has ever said Myrddraal do not have a star wit. And of course, Varen said calmly, the man who channels must be one of the 3 young men traveling with you, Moiraine. Moiraine stared in shock. Not aware of the world? I am a fool. Before she realized she reached out to the pulsing room and was there waiting. The one that surged along her veins, charging her with energy, muting the sheen of the power from the Amerlin seat as she did the same. Moiraine had never before even thought of wielding the power against another Aes Sedai. We live in perilous times, and the world hangs in the balance, and what must be done, must be done. It must. Oh, Varen, why did you have to put your nose in the line? Varen closed her book and slipped it back behind her belt, then looked from one woman to the other. To be aware of the nimbus surrounding each of them, the light that came from touching the true source. Only someone trained in channeling herself could see the glow, but there was no chance of any Aes Sedai missing it in another woman. A hint of satisfaction settled on Varen's face, but no sign that she realized she had hurled a lightning bolt. She only looked as if she had found another piece that fit in a puzzle. Yes, I thought it must be so. Moiraine could not do it for me, and who better to help than her girlhood friend who used to sneak down with her to snitch sweet cakes? She blinked. Forgive me, Mother. I should not have said that. Varen. The Amerlin shook her head.
How's everyone's day going so far?
You accuse your sister and me of... I won't even say it. And you are worried that you've spoken too familiarly to the Amerlin seat? You bore a hole in the boat and worry that it's raining. Think what you are suggesting, daughter. It is too late for that, Siuan, Moiraine thought. If we had not reached for the source, perhaps then, but she is sure now. Why are you telling us this, Varen? She said aloud. If you believe what you say, you should be telling it to the other sisters, to the Reds in particular. Varen's eyes widened in surprise. Yes, I suppose I should. I hadn't thought of that. But then, if I did, you would be stilled, Moiraine, and you, Mother, and the man gentled. No one has ever recorded the progression in a man who wields the power. When does the madness come, exactly? And how does it take him? How quickly does it grow? Can he still function with his body rotting around him? For how long? Unless he is gentled, what will happen to the young man, whichever he is, will happen whether or not I am there to put down the answers. If he is watched and guided, we should be able to keep some record with reasonable safety, for a time at least. And, too, there is the Career-thon cycle. She calmly returned their startled looks. I assume, Mother, that he is the dragon reborn. I cannot believe you would do this, leave walking free a man who can channel, unless he was the dragon. She thinks only of the knowledge, Moiraine thought wonderfully. The culmination of the direst prophecy the world knows, perhaps the end of the world, and she cares only about the knowledge. But she is still dangerous for that. Who else knows of this? The Amerlin's voice was faint, but still sharp. Seraphel, I suppose. Who else, Varen? No one, Mother. Seraphel is not really interested in anything that someone hasn't already set down in a book, preferably as long ago as possible. She thinks there are enough old books and manuscripts and fragments scattered about, lost or forgotten, to equal 10 times what we have gathered in Tar Valon. She feels certain there is enough of the old knowledge still there to be found, but enough, sister, Moiraine said. She loosed her hold on the true source, and after a moment felt the Amerlin do the same. It was always a loss to feel the power draining away, like blood and life pouring from an open wound. A part of her wanted to hold on, but unlike some of her sisters, she made it a point of self-discipline not to grow too fond of the feeling. Sit down, Varen, and tell us what you know and how you found it out. Leave out nothing. As Varen took a chair, with a look to the Amerlin for permission to sit, Moiraine watched her sadly. It is unlikely, Varen began, that anyone who hadn't studied the old records would notice anything except that you were behaving oddly. Forgive me. It was nearly 20 years ago with Tar Valon.
That one was nasty one. That was almost like a
first clue, and that was
hot dab. Hey, Benny.
Help me, Varen.
How you doing?
How I loved you for those sweet cakes, and for your bosom to weep on. But I will do what I must do. I will. I must.
Mary stared around the corner at the retreating back. She smelled of lavender, though most would not have sensed it close up. As soon as she got out of sight, he hurried for the infirmary door. He had already tried to see Mat once, and that Aes Sedai,
Oh, yeah.
he had heard somebody call her, had nearly snapped his head off without even looking around to see who he was. He felt uneasy around Aes Sedai, especially if they started looking at his eyes. Pausing at the door, he could hear no footsteps down the corridor. Nothing on the other side of the door. He went in and closed it softly behind him. The infirmary was a long room with white walls, the entrances to archers' balconies.
Should not took that last one. That was a
Matt
nasty
was in
one.
one of the narrow beds that lined the walls. After last night, Perrin had expected most of the beds to have men in them. But in a moment he realized the keep was full of Aes Sedai. The only thing an Aes Sedai could not cure by was death. The smell of sickness anyway. Perrin grimaced when he saw it. Matt lay still, eyes closed, hands unmoving atop his blankets. He looked exhausted.
Yeah, too hot.
Not sick, really.
And I even did a
But
cold
as if he had
start.
worked 3 days in the fields and only now laid down to rest. He smelled.
Did a cold start in. Well,
There
it was the
nothing
second
Perrin
one because I
could
put a
make
big
do.
dab in there.
Just wrong.
I did it.
Perrin sat down carefully on the mats. He did things carefully. He was bigger than most
I
people,
did it.
and had been
That's
bigger than
it.
the other boys as long as he could
Then
remember.
there's still something in there.
He
Usually,
had to be careful so he would not hurt someone
if
accidentally.
you heat it up just right, you get another rip out of it.
Now it was second
But-
nature to him. He liked to think things through, too.
I think I might heat it up too
Sometimes
much
talk
because
them
it
over
tasted
with
like a.
With grand thinking, he's a lord. Yeah. Imagine that much to say. He had gone into one of the gardens the
Like
night
I just
before
did a hot
to
dab
think things
on the
through.
quartz.
The memory still made him a little ashamed. If he had not gone, he would have been in his room to go with Egwene and Matt, and maybe he could have kept them from being hurt. More likely, he knew, he would be in one
Hey,
of those
running
beds
bear.
like Matt, or dead. But that did not change what he felt. Still, he went to the garden, and it was nothing to do with the Trolloc attack that was worrying him now. Serving women had found him sitting there in the dark, and one of the Lady Amalise's attendants, the Lady Tamora. As soon as they came upon him, Tamora sent one of the others running, and he had heard her say, "Find Liandrin Sedai, quickly." They had stood there watching him, as if they had thought he might vanish in a puff of smoke like a gleeman. That had been when
Hope
the first
everyone's
alarm
doing
bell
good
rang
this
and
morning.
everybody in the keep started
And had a
running.
safe weekend.
Leandrin, he muttered now. Red Adja. All they do is hunt for men who channel. You don't think she believes I'm one of those, do you? Matt did not answer, of course. Aaron rubbed his nose ruefully. Now I'm talking to myself. I don't need that on top of everything else. Matt's eyelids fluttered. What happened? His eyes did not open all the way, and his voice sounded as if he were still mostly asleep. Don't you remember, Matt? Remember? Matt sleepily raised a hand toward his face, and then let it fall again with a sigh. His eyes began to drift shut. Remember, Egwene asked me to go down, see Fane. He laughed, and it turned into a yawn. She didn't ask. Told me. Don't know what happened after.
Hey, Ozark,
He
how you
smacked his
doing?
lips and resumed the deep, even breathing of sleep. Aaron leaped to his feet as his ears caught the sound of approaching footsteps, but there was nowhere to
Hope
go.
everyone's doing good.
He was still standing there beside Matt's bed when the door opened and Lyanna came in. She stopped, put her fists on her hips, and looked him slowly up and down.
Well, it's the same
She
old,
was nearly
same
as
old.
tall
I'm
as he
still,
was.
as you guys can see, I'm still at my mom's
said,
and that's
quietly,
house sitting.
Are almost a pretty enough boy to make me wish I was a green. Almost. But if you've decided to be patient, well, I dealt with brothers almost as big as you before I went to the tower, so you needn't think those shoulders will help you any. Aaron cleared his throat. Half the time he did not understand what women meant when they said things. Not like Rand. He always knows what to say to the girls. He realized he was scowling and wiped it away. He did not want to think about Rand, but he certainly did not want to upset Aes Sedai, especially one who was beginning to tap her foot impatiently.
You have cucumbers coming out your ears,
I
huh?
didn't disturb him. He's still sleeping. See?
So you had good hauling out
So
cucumbers, huh? Running
Good
bear.
thing for you. Now, what are you doing in here? I remember chasing you out once. You needn't think I don't. I only wanted to know how he is. She hesitated. He is sleeping, is how he is.
Hell
In
yeah.
a few hours,
That's when you have all
you will get out of
kinds
that bed and you'll think
regular
there was never
put away.
anything wrong
Then
with him.
you can always make all
The
kinds of
pause
pickles
made his
too.
hackles rise. She was lying, somehow. Aes Sedai never lied, but they did not always tell the truth either.
So I know
He was
my
not
aunt's
certain
got
what was going on.
a lot of
Leandrin
homemade
looking for him,
different
Lyanna
pickles
lying
here.
to him. But he thought it was time he got away from Aes Sedai. There was
Yeah,
nothing
like
he
your
could do
regular
for him.
pickles that someone in
Thank
town
you,
makes
he
them.
said.
They're all
I'd
homemade
better let him
pickles and
sleep
whatnot
then.
from cucumbers.
Excuse me.
But they got
He
the
tried to
regular
slide around her to the
pickles.
door, but suddenly her
Then you
hand
can get
shot
the
out
bread
and
and
grabbed his
butter
face,
ones.
tilting it down so she could peer into his eyes.
Oh, excuse me.
Something seemed to
Then
pass
they
through
have
him.
like your
A warm
regular
ripple that
hot
started
ones.
at the top of his head and
Then
went
they
to his
have
feet,
ghost
then
pepper
came back
ones,
again. He pulled
Carolina
his head out
Reaper
of her hands.
peppers, or
You're
Carolina
as healthy
Reaper
as a young wild
pickles.
animal, she said, pursing her lips. But if you were born with those eyes, I am a white cloak. They're the only eyes I ever had, he growled. He
And
felt a little abashed, speaking to an
like
Aes
the
Sedai
trip
in that
is,
tone.
she actually
But
has
he was as surprised as she when
my
he took her
aunt.
gently
It's
by the
her.
arms and lifted her to one side, setting her down again.
It's I
out of his
guess
way.
it's her boyfriend that
As
makes
they stared
it.
at each other, he wondered if his eyes were as wide with shock as hers.
It's a he makes jellies,
Excuse me.
but he
said
actually
again.
uses
All but ran.
he uses ghost pepper and Carolina Reapers
Like cursed eyes.
in a jelly.
The morning sunlight caught his eyes, and they glinted like burnished gold.
And he also does
Rand twisted on his bed,
like
trying
that,
to find a comfortable position on the thin
what
mattress.
is it, like that pink
Sunlight streamed through the arrow slits, painting the
Himalayan
bare
rock
stone
salt that you gotta
He
like
had not
crush,
slept during
use
the
a
remainder of the
grinder to
night.
put in food
Tired
and
as he
whatnot.
was, he was sure he could not
He
sleep
actually
now.
does
The leather
a ghost
jerkin lay on the
pepper
floor
and a
between his
Carolina
bed and
Reaper
the
one of
wall.
that too.
Aside from that, he was fully
He
dressed,
said that one
even to his
takes
new boots.
longer,
His sword stood propped beside
but
the bed,
yeah,
and
pretty
his
much
bow
just
and quiver
grind up the
rested in the
fucking
corner
salt in your
across the bundle
food.
of cloaks. He
And
could not rid himself of the feeling
be
that he should take the
extremely
chance
careful
Moraine
because
had
it's
given
gonna be
him.
like ghost pepper,
Leave
Carolina
immediately.
Reaper.
The urge had been with him all night. 3 times he had risen to go.
The
Twice he
jelly's
had
not
gone as
too
far as
bad.
opening the door.
It's
The hall had been
just
empty except for a few servants doing late chores. The way had been clear.
When you don't know, the jelly
Perrin
is
came in,
ghost
head
pepper
down,
jelly.
yawning, and Rand sat up.
It's a little bit surprising.
How is Egwene and Matt? She's asleep, so they tell me.
So I went.
They wouldn't let me
I
into the
got.
women's
Cause
apartment
I was
to
another
see
time
her.
I was house sitting.
Matt is.
I went and made some toast because I was gonna put some butter and
You're
some
so interested. Anything God is
jelly
doing
on it.
yourself. I thought you were not interested in
and
us
I put the
anymore.
butter.
You said you weren't.
And it
You
was
opened the door of the wardrobe and began
I think it was
rummaging
a
for
strawberry
signature.
or a cherry jelly. I can't
I
remember
did go to the
which.
infirmary, Perrin.
But
There was an Aes Sedai there.
I
That
like
tall one was
jelly,
always
so
with the Amerlin seat.
I put a
She
thick
said Matt was
layer of it
asleep.
on there.
And I was in the way, and I could come
Took
back
one
some other
bite.
time.
Yeah, look,
She sounded
this is
like
good
Master
jelly.
Crane ordering the men
Took
at
a
the mill.
second bite, and then
You know
I'm
how
chewing a
Master
second
Crane is,
bite.
all full of snap.
That
Do
heat
it right
hits.
the first time and do it right
And
now.
it wasn't like
Perrin did not answer. He
like
just
a
shucked off his
really
coat
bad,
and pulled his shirt
unbearable
off over
heat.
his head.
It's one of those heats that had
Rand
you
studied his
just
friend's back for a moment, then dug up a laugh.
sucking in air.
You want to hear something?
It was that
You
type
know
of
what she
heat.
said to me? The Aes Sedai in the infirmary, I mean.
Tasted really
saw how
good.
tall she
Just
As tall as most men. A hand taller, and she could almost look me in the
I guess
eyes.
if you're expecting it,
Well,
it's
she's
not be
staring
that
me
bad
up
of a
and down,
surprise.
And then she muttered, "Tall, aren't you?"
I know my brother's
Where were
got
you when I
some
was
at the
16?
house that he got
Or
for
even
Christmas.
And then she laughed as if it was all a joke. What do you think of that?
He was disappointed in it
Perrin finished tugging on a clean shirt.
because
and gave
the
him
way
a
I
sidelong
described
look.
it,
With his burly
he was
shoulders and
expecting
thick
that
curls,
type
he
of
made
heat to
Rand think
hit,
of a hurt bear.
and it didn't.
A bear that did not understand why he had been hurt. Perrin, I'm...
But watch, let me go get. I
If you
think
want
my
to
aunt
make
actually has
jokes
some of
with
that
Aes Sedai, Perrin,
salt.
go ahead. That's up to you, my lord. He began stuffing his shirt tail into his breeches. I don't spend much time being witty. Is that the word? Witty with Aes Sedai. But then, I'm only a clumsy blacksmith. And I might be in somebody's way, my lord. Snatching his coat from the floor, he started for the door. Burn me, Perrin, I'm sorry. I was afraid and I thought I was in trouble. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. I don't know. And I didn't want you and Matt to be in it with me. Like, all the women were looking for me last night. I think that's part of the trouble I'm in. I think so. And Liandrin, she... He threw up his hands. Perrin, believe me, you don't want any part of this.
You
Perrin
definitely
stopped,
smelled the heat.
But he stood facing the door and only turned his head enough for Rand to see one
But
golden eye.
this one's marked
Looking for
mixed, so it's probably
Maybe they were looking
a mix
for all
between
of us.
the
No, they
habanero,
were looking for me.
the reaper,
I
and
wish
the
they
ghost
hadn't been,
pepper
but
because
I
he
know
does
better.
3 different ones.
Perrin shook his head. Liandrin wanted me anyway, I know. I heard. Rand frowned. Why would she? It doesn't change anything. Look, I opened my mouth and said what I shouldn't. I didn't mean it, Perrin. Now please, would you tell me about Matt? He's asleep. Liana, that's the
And
Aes
usually when he
Sedai,
sells the
said he
salt,
would be on his feet in
it
a few
comes with
hours.
this cool
He
little
shrugged uncomfortably. I
like
think she was
heavy duty
lying.
glass shaker.
I know Aes
That way you
Sedai
can
never
twist
lie,
it and it
not so you can
crumbles
catch them,
it
but
or
she was lying,
whatnot.
keeping something back. He paused, looking at Rand sideways.
And then the
You
jelly
didn't mean all
he
that?
makes like, what is it,
You want me here
cherry,
together? You and me and Matt?
strawberry,
I can't, Perrin.
I think
I can't
grape.
tell you why, but I really do have to go by my... Perrin, wait! The door slammed behind his friend. Rand fell back on the bed. I can't tell you, he muttered. He pounded his fist on the side of the bed. I can't. But you can go now, a voice said in the back of his head. Egwene's going to be all right, and Matt will be up and around in an hour or two. You can go now, before Moraine changes her mind. He started to sit up when a pounding on the door made him leap to his feet. If it was Perrin come back, he would not knock. The pounding came again. Who is it? Lan strode in, pushing the door to behind him with his boot heel. As usual, he wore his sword over a plain coat of green that was nearly invisible in the woods. This time, though, he had a wide golden cord tied high around his left arm, the fringed ends hanging almost to his elbow. On the knot was pinned a golden crane in flight, the symbol of Malkir. The Amerlin seat wants you, sheep herder. You can't go like that. Out of that shirt and brush your hair. You look like a haystack. He jerked open the wardrobe and began pawing at the clothes Rand meant to leave behind. Rand stood stiff where he was. He felt as though he had been hit in the head with a hammer. He had expected it, of course, in a way, but he had been sure he would be gone before the summons came.
Anyone got any plans for their weekend?
Right, I'm sure of it. What do you mean she wants me? I'm leaving, Lan. You were right. I'm going to the stable right now, get my horse, and leave. You should have done that last night. The warder tossed a white silk shirt onto the bed. No one refuses an audience with the Amelin Seat, Sheepherder. Not the Lord Captain Commander of the White Cloaks himself. Pedron Niall might spend the trip planning how to kill her, if he could do it and get away, but he would come. He turned around with one of the high-collared coats in his hands and held it up. This one will do. Tangled, long-thorned briars climbed each red sleeve in a thick, gold-embroidered line and ran around each cuff.
I know pickling's
stood on the collars, which were edged.
It's pretty
gold.
Easy,
The color is right too.
and it'll keep them long too. Cause you do that with
Come on,
cause me and my
Sheepherder.
brother
Change your shirt. Move.
we've pickled
Reluctantly, Rand pulled the coarse wool workman's shirt over his
pickles,
head.
cauliflower, broccoli,
A silk shirt? I never wore a silk shirt in my life.
and of course pickled
And I
eggs.
never wore so fancy a coat either. Even
Then
on a
also
feast day.
throw some garlic in there.
Aaron sees me in that. Burn me after all that fool talk about being a lord. If he sees me in that, he'll never listen to reason. You can't go before the Amelin Seat dressed like a groom fresh out of the stable, Sheepherder. Let me see your boots. They'll do. Well, get on with it. Get on with it. You don't keep the Amelin waiting. Wear your sword. My sword? The silk shirt over his head muffled Rand's yelp. He yanked it the rest of the way on. In the women's apartments? Lan, if I go for an audience with the Amelin Seat, wearing a sword,
I
she'll...
don't think we've done that in a while.
Lan cut
I have
him
to
off
talk to
proudly.
my brother, see what he feels about that.
If the Amelin is afraid of you, and it's smarter for you to think she isn't because I don't know anything that could frighten that woman, it won't be for a sword.
Hell yeah, Super
Now
Bob.
remember, you kneel when you go before
Thanks for
her.
stopping by.
One knee only, mind, he added sharply. You're not some merchant caught giving short weight. Maybe you had
Yes, we
better practice
appreciate
it.
the
I know how I
support
take
and
you.
the
I
show
saw
of
the
love,
queen's eyes
Super
melt to win
Bob.
more gaze.
Yeah,
Ghost of a
yeah,
smile
I'm
touched the water's
usually
lips.
going. The only time I usually go
Yes,
live
you
like
do it
this
just
is
as they
when I'm over here at my mom's
That'll
house
give them
sitting.
something to think about.
Usually it's me and my brother
Why are you telling me this, Lan?
doing our smoke
You're a
lives
warden.
at
You're
the
acting as
house
if
at
you are
night.
on my side. I am on your side, Sheepherder. A little. Enough to help you a bit. The warder's face was stone, and sympathetic words sounded strange in that rough voice. What training you've had I gave you, and I'll not have you grumbling and sniveling. The wheel weaves us all into the pattern as it wills. You have less freedom about it than most. But by the light, you can still face it on your feet. You remember who the Amelin Seat is, Sheepherder, and you show her proper respect, but you do what I tell you, and you look her in the eye. Well, don't stand there gaping. Tuck in your shirt. Rand shut his mouth and tucked in his shirt. Remember who she is? Burn me what I wouldn't give to forget who she is. Lan kept up a running flow of instructions while Rand shrugged into the red coat and buckled on his sword. What to say and to whom, and what not to say. What to do and what not. How to move, even. He was not sure he could remember it all. Most of it sounded odd and easy to forget. And he was sure whatever he forgot would be just the thing to make the Aes Sedai angry with him. If they aren't already. If Moraine told the Amelin Seat, who else did she tell? Lan, why can't I just leave the way I planned? By the time she knew I was not coming, I'd be a league outside the walls and galloping. And she'd have trackers after you before you had gone too. What the Amelin wants, Sheepherder, she gets. He adjusted Rand's sword belt so the heavy buckle was centered. What I do is the best I can for you. Believe it. But why all this? What does it mean? Why do I put my hand over my heart if the Amelin Seat stands up? Why refuse anything but water? Not that I want to eat a meal with her. Then dribble some on the floor and say, the land thirsts. And if she asks how old I am, why tell her how long it is since I was given the sword? I don't understand half of what you've told me. 3 drops, Sheepherder. Don't pour it. You sprinkle 3 drops only. You can understand later so long as you remember now. Think of it as upholding custom. The Amerlin will do with you as she must. If you believe you can avoid it, then you believe you can fly to the moon like Len. You can't escape, but maybe you can hold your own for a while, and perhaps you can keep your pride at least. Like burn me, I am probably wasting my time, but I've nothing better to do. Hold still. From his pocket, the warder produced a long length of wide-fringed golden cord and tied it around Rand's left arm in a complicated knot. On the knot, he fastened a red enameled pin, an eagle with its wings spread. I had that made to give you. Now is as good a time as any. That will make them think. There was no doubt about it now. The warder was smiling. Rand looked down at the pin worriedly. Kaldazar, the red eagle of Manetheren. A thorn to the Dark One's foot, he murmured. It brambled to his hand. He looked at the warder. Manetheren's long dead and forgotten, Lan. It's just a name in a book now. There is only the two rivers. Whatever else I am, I'm a shepherd and a farmer, that's all. Well, the sword that could not be broken was shattered in the end, sheepherder, but it fought the shadow to the last. There is one rule above all others for being a man. Whatever comes, face it on your feet. Now, are you ready? The Amerlin seat waits. With a cold knot on the pit of his belly, Rand followed the warder into the hall. Chapter 8. The Dragon Reborn. Rand walked stiff-legged and nervous at first beside the warder. Place it on your feet. It was easy for Lan to say. He had not been summoned by the Amerlin seat. He was not wondering if he would be gentle before the day was done, or worse. Rand felt as if he had something caught in his throat. He could not swallow, and he wanted to badly. The corridors bustled with people, servants going about their morning chores, warriors wearing swords over lounging robes. A few young boys carrying small practice swords stayed near their elders, imitating the way they walked. No sign remained of the fighting, but an air of alertness clung even to the children. Grown men looked like cats waiting for a pack of rats. Ingtar gave Rand and Lan a peculiar look, almost troubled, opening his mouth, then saying nothing as they passed him. Kajin, tall and lean and sallow, pumped his fists over his head and shouted, Taishar, Malkir! Taishar, Manetheren! True blood of Malkir, true blood of Manetheren. Rand jumped. Light, why did he say that? Don't be a fool, he told himself. They all know about Manetheren here. They know every old story, if it has fighting in it. Burn me, I have to take a rein on myself. Lan raised his fists in reply. Taishar Shinar! If he made a run for it, could he lose himself in the crowd long enough to reach his horse? If she sends trackers after me. With every step, he grew more tense. As they approached the women's apartments, Lan suddenly Cat crosses the courtyard. Startled, Rand instinctively assumed the walking stance, as he had been taught. Back straight, but every leg as if he hung from a wire at the top of his head. It was a relaxed, almost arrogant saunter. Relaxed on the outside, he certainly was. He had no time to wonder what he was doing. They rounded the last corridor and stepped with each other. The women at the entrance to the women's apartments looked up calmly as they came closer. Some sat behind slanted tables, checking large ledgers and sometimes making an entry. Others were knitting or working with needle and embroidery hoop. Ladies in silks kept this watch, as well as women in livery. The arched doors stood open, unguarded except for the women. No more was needed. No Shinaran man would enter uninvited, but any Shinaran man stood ready to defend that door if needed, and he would be aghast at the need. Rand's stomach churned, harsh and acid. They'll take one look at our swords and turn us away. Well, that's what I want, isn't it? If they turn us back, maybe I can still get away. If they don't call the guards down on us. He clung to the stance Lan had given him, as he would to a floating branch in a flood. Holding it was the only thing that kept him from turning tail and running. One of the Lady Amalisa's attendants, Nisera, a round-faced woman, put aside her embroidery and stood as they came to a stop. Her eyes flickered across their swords, and her mouth tightened, but she did not mention them. All the women stopped what they were doing to watch, silent and intent. Honor to you both, Nasura said, bowing her head slightly. She glanced at Rand so quickly he was almost not sure he had seen it. It reminded him of what Perrin had said.
1 second, everyone.
The Amarlin seat awaits you. She motioned, and 2 other ladies, not servants, they were being honored, stepped forward for escorts. The women bowed, a hair more than Nasura had, and motioned them through the archway. They both gave Rand a sidelong glance, then did not look at him again. Are they looking for all of us, or just me? Like all of us. Inside, they got the looks Rand expected. 2 men in the women's apartments, where men were rare, and their swords caused more than one raised eyebrow. But none of the women spoke. The 2 men left knots of conversation in their path, soft murmurs too low for Rand to make out. Lan strode along as if he did not even notice. Rand kept pace behind their escorts and wished he could hear. And then they reached the Amarlin seat's chambers, with 3 Aes Sedai in the hall outside the door. The tall Aes Sedai, Lyanna, held her gold-flamed staff. Rand did not know the other 2, one of the white Ajah, and one yellow but he remembered their faces, though, staring at him as he had run through these same halls. Smooth Aes Sedai faces with knowing eyes. They studied him with arched eyebrows and pursed lips. The women who had brought Lan and Rand curtsied, handing them over to the Aes Sedai. Lyanna looked Rand over with a slight smile. Despite the smile, her voice had a snap to it. What have you brought the Amarlin seat today, Lan Gaidin? A young lion? Better you don't let any greens see this one, or one of them will bond him before he can take a breath. Greens like to bond them young. Rand wondered if it was really possible to sweat inside your skin. He felt as if he was. He wanted to look at Lan, but
What's
he
everyone
remembered
smoking on today?
instructions. I am Randolph Thor.
Are you smoking
son
on
of
anything?
Tamil Thor, of the 2 rivers, which once was Manetheren. As I have been summoned by the Amarlin seat, Lyanna Sedai, so do I come. I stand ready. He was surprised that his voice did not shake once. Lyanna blinked, and her smile faded to a thoughtful look. This is supposed to be a shepherd, Lan Gaidin. He was not so sure of himself this morning. He is a man, Lyanna Sedai, Lan said firmly. No more and no less. We are what we are. The Aes Sedai shook her head. The world grows stranger every day. I suppose the blacksmith will wear a crown and speak in high chant. Wait here. She vanished inside to announce them. She was only gone a few moments, but Rand was uncomfortably aware of the eyes of the remaining Aes Sedai. He tried to return their gaze levelly, the way Lan had told him to, and they put their heads together, whispering. What are they saying? What do they know? Light. Are they going to gentle me? Is that what Lan meant about facing whatever comes? Lyanna returned, motioning Rand to go in. When Lan started to follow, she thrust her staff across his chest, stopping him. Not you, Lan Gaidin. Moiraine Sedai has a task for you. Your lion cub will be safe enough by himself. The door swung shut behind Rand, but not before he heard Lan's voice, fierce and strong, but low for his ear alone. Tashar Manetheren. Moiraine sat to one side of the room, and one of the brown Aes Sedai he had seen in the dungeon sat to the other. But it was the woman in the tall chair behind the wide table who held his eyes. The curtains had been partially drawn over the arrow slits, but the gaps let in enough light behind her to make her face hard to see clearly. He still recognized her. The Amarlin seat. Quickly he dropped to one knee, left hand on sword belt, right fist pressed to the pattern, and bowed his head. As you have summoned me, Mother, so have I come. I stand ready. He lifted his head in time to see her eyebrows rise. Do you now, boy? She sounded almost amused, and something else he could not make out. She certainly did not look amused. Stand up, boy. Let me have a look at you. He straightened and tried to keep his face relaxed. It was an effort not to clench his hands. 3 Aes Sedai. How many does it take to gentle a man? They said a dozen or more after Logain. Would Moiraine do that to me? He met the Amarlin seat's look, eye to eye. She did not blink. "Sit, boy," she said finally, gesturing to a ladder-back chair that had been pulled around squarely in front of the table. "This will not be short, I fear." "Thank you, Mother." He bowed his head, then, as Lan had told him, glanced at the chair and touched his sword. "By your leave, Mother, I will stand. The watch is not done." The Amerlin Seat made an exasperated sound and looked at Moraine. "Have you let Lan at him, daughter? This will be difficult enough without him picking up waterways." "Lan has been teaching all the boys, Mother," Moraine replied calmly. "He has spent a little more time with this one than the others because he carries a sword." The brown Aes Sedai shifted on her chair. "The Gaidin are stiff-necked and proud, Mother, but useful. I would not be without Tomas, as you would not lose Ulrich. I have even heard a few Reds say they sometimes wish for a warder. And the Greens, of course." The three Aes Sedai were all ignoring him now. "This sword," the Amerlin Seat said, "it appears to be a heron-marked blade. How did he come by that, Moraine?" "Tam Al'Thor left the Two Rivers as a boy, Mother. He joined the army of Ilion and served in the White Cloak War and the last two wars with Tyr. In time, he rose to be a blade master and the second captain of the Companions. After the Aiel War, Tam Al'Thor returned to the Two Rivers with a wife from Caemlyn and an infant boy. It would have saved much had I known this earlier, but I know it now." Rand stared at Moraine. He knew Tam had left the Two Rivers and come back with an Outlander wife and the sword. But the rest? Where did you learn all that? Not in Emond's Field. Unless Nynaeve told you more than she's ever told me. An infant boy? She doesn't say his son, but I am. Against Tyr. The Amerlin Seat frowned slightly. Well, there was blame enough on both sides in those wars. Cool men who would rather fight than talk. Can you tell if the blade is authentic, Baron? There are tests, Mother. Then take it and test it, daughter. The three women were not even looking at him. Rand stepped back, gripping the hilt hard. "My father gave this sword to me," he said angrily. "Nobody is taking it from me." It was only then that he realized Varen had not moved from her chair. He looked at them in confusion, trying to recover his equilibrium. "So," the Amerlin Seat said, "you have some fire in you besides whatever Lan put in. Good. You will need it." "I am what I am, Mother," he managed smoothly enough. "I stand ready for what comes." The Amerlin Seat grimaced. "Lan has been at you. Listen to me, boy. In a few hours, Ingtar will leave to find the stolen horn. Your friend Mat will go with him. I expect that your other friend, Perrin, will go also. Do you wish to accompany them?" "Mat and Perrin are going? Why?" Belatedly, he remembered to add a respectful, "Mother." "You know of the dagger your friend carried?" A twist of her mouth showed what she thought of the dagger. "That was taken too. Unless it is found, the link between him and the blade cannot be broken completely, and he will die. You can ride with them if you want, or you can stay here. No doubt Lord Aglamar will let you remain as a guest as long as you wish. I will be leaving today as well. Moraine Sedai will accompany me, and so will Egwene and Nynaeve. So you will stay alone if you stay. The choice is yours." Rand stared at her. "She's saying I can go as I want. Is that what she brought me here for? Mat is dying." He glanced at Moraine, sitting impassively with her hands folded in her lap. She looked as if nothing in the world could concern her less than where he went. "Which way are you trying to push me, Aes Sedai? Burn me, but I'll go another. But if Mat's dying, I can't abandon him. Wait, how are we going to find that dagger?" "You do not have to make the choice now," the Amerlin said. She did not seem to care either. "But you will have to choose before Ingtar leaves." "I will ride with Ingtar, Mother." The Amerlin Seat nodded absently. "Now that that is dealt with, we can move on to important matters. I know you can channel, boy. What do you know? Rand's mouth fell open. Caught up in worrying about Matt, her casual words hit him like a swinging barn door. All of Land's advice and instructions went spinning. He stared at her, licking his lips. It was one thing to think she knew, entirely another to find out she really did. The sweat finally seeped out on his forehead. She leaned forward in her seat, waiting for his answer, but he had the feeling she wanted to lean back. He remembered what Lan had said. If she's afraid of you, he wanted to laugh. If she was afraid of him. No, I can't. I mean, I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened. I don't want to channel the power. I won't ever do it again. I swear it. You don't want to, the Amarylline Seed said. Well, that's wise of you. And foolish, too. Some can be taught to channel. Most cannot. A few, though, have the seed in them at birth. Sooner or later, they wield the one power, whether they want to or not, as surely as roe makes fish. You will continue to channel, boy. You can't help it. And you had better learn to channel. Learn to control it. Or you will not live long enough to go mad. The one power kills those who cannot control its flow. How am I supposed to learn? He demanded. Moraine and Baron just sat there, unruffled, watching him. Like spiders. How? Moraine claims she can't teach me anything, and I don't know how to learn or what. I don't want to anyway. I want to stop. Can't you understand that? To stop! I told you the truth, Rand, Moraine said. She sounded as if they were having a pleasant conversation. Those who could teach you, the male Aes Sedai, are 3,000 years dead. No Aes Sedai living can teach you to touch saidin any more than you could learn to touch saidar. A bird cannot teach a fish to fly, nor a fish teach a bird to swim. I have always thought that was a bad saying, Baron said suddenly. There are birds that dive and swim, and in the sea of storms are fish that fly, with long fins that stretch out as wide as your outstretched arms, and beaks like swords that can pierce. Her words trailed off, and she became flustered. Moraine and the Amarylline Seed were staring at her without expression. Rand took the interruption to try to regain some control of himself. As Tam had taught him long ago, he formed a single flame in his mind and fed his fears into it, seeking emptiness, the stillness of the void. The flame seemed to grow until it enveloped everything, until it was too large to contain or imagine any longer. With that, it was gone, leaving in its place a sense of peace. At its edges, emotions still flickered, fear and anger like black blotches, but the void held. Thought skimmed across its surface like pebbles across ice. The Aes Sedai's attention was only off him for a moment, but when they turned back, his face was calm. Why are you talking to me like this, Mother? He asked. You should be gentling me. The Amarylline Seed frowned and turned to Moraine. Did Lan teach him this? No, Mother. He had that from Tam Althor. Why? Rand demanded again. The Amarylline Seed looked him straight in the eye and said, Because you are the dragon reborn. The void rocked. The world rocked. Everything seemed to spin around him. He concentrated on nothing, and the emptiness returned. The world steadied. No, Mother. I can channel the light, help me, but I am not Rowland Darksbane, nor Gwer Amalasan, nor Urian Stonebow. You can gentle me or kill me, or let me go. But I will not be a tame false dragon on a Tarvalin leash. He heard Baron gasp, and the Amarylline's eyes widened. Gay was as hard as blue rock. It did not affect him. He slid off the void again. Where did you hear those names? The Amarylline demanded. Who told you Tarvalin told the lies on any false dragon? He said, I believe him. His name was Tom Merrill. He's dead now. Moraine made a sound and he glanced at her. She claimed Tom was not dead, but she had never offered any proof, and he could not see how any man could survive grappling hand-to-hand with a Fade. The thought was extraneous and it faded away. There was only the void and the oneness now. You are not a false dragon, the Amerlin said firmly. You are the true dragon reborn. I'm a shepherd from the Two Rivers. Daughter, the story. True story, boy. Listen well. Moraine began speaking. Bran kept his eyes on the Amerlin's face, but he heard. Nearly 20 years ago, the Aiel crossed the spine of the world, the Dragon Wall, the only time they have ever done so. They ravaged through Carrion, destroyed everything they sent against them, burned the city of Carrion itself, and fought all the way to Tar Valon. It was winter and snowing, but cold or heat mean little to an Aiel. The final battle, the last that counted, was fought outside the Shining Walls in the shadow of Dragonmount. In 3 days and nights of fighting, the Aiel were turned back. Or rather, they turned back, for they had done what they came to do, which was to kill King Laman of Carrion for his sin against the tree. It is then that my story begins, and yours. They came over the Dragon Wall like a flood, all the way to the Shining Walls. Rand waited for the memories to fade, but it was Tam's voice he heard, Tam sick and raving, pulling up secrets from his past. The voice clung outside the void, clamoring to get in. I was one of the accepted then, Moraine said, as was our mother, the Amerlin Seat. We were soon to be raised to sisterhood. That night we stood attendance on the then Amerlin. Her keeper of the chronicles, Gitara Moroso, was there. Every other full sister in Tar Valon was out healing as many wounded as she could find, even the Reds. It was dawn. The fire on the hearth could not keep the cold out. The snow had finally stopped, and in the Amerlin's chambers in the White Tower, we could smell the smoke of outlying villages burned in the fighting. Battles are always hot, even in the snow. Had to get away from the stink of death. Tam's delirious voice clawed at the empty calm inside Rand. The void trembled and shrank, steadied, then wavered again. The Amerlin's eyes bored at him. He felt sweat on his face again. It was all a fever dream, he said. He was sick. He raised his voice. My name is Rand al'Thor. I am a shepherd. My father is Tam al'Thor, and my mother was... Moraine had paused for him, but now her unchanging voice cut him off, soft and relentless. The Cariathon cycle, the prophecies of the dragon, says that the dragon will be reborn on the slopes of Dragonmount, where he died during the breaking of the world. Gitara Sedai had the foretelling sometimes. She was old, her hair as white as the snow outside. But when she had the foretelling, it was strong. The morning light through the windows was strengthening as I handed her a cup of tea. The Amerlin Seat asked me what news there was from the field of battle. And Gitara Sedai started up out of her chair, her arms and legs rigid, trembling. Her face as if she looked into the pit of doom at Shale Ghul, and she cried out, He is born again. I feel him. The dragon takes his first breath on the slope of Dragonmount. He is coming. He is coming. Light helpless. Light help the world. He lies in the snow and cries like the thunder. He burns like the sun. And she fell forward into my arms, dead. Slope of the mountain, heard a baby cry. Gave birth there alone before she died. Child blew with the cold. Rand tried to force Tam's voice away. The boy grew smaller. A fever dream, he gasped. I couldn't leave a child. I was born in the Two Rivers. Always knew you wanted children, Kari. He pulled his eyes away from the Amerlin's gaze. He tried to force the void to hold. He knew that was not the way, but it was collapsing in him. Yes, lass. Rand is a good name.
Hey, Q, how you doing?
al'Thor.
Morning.
His legs trembled.
Hey,
And
Shorts.
so we knew the dragon was reborn.
I was just listening to a book again,
The
having a
Amerlin
cup
swore
of
us to
coffee and
secrecy, we too.
a bowl.
For she knew not all the sisters would see the rebirth as it must be seen. She set us to searching. There were many fatherless children after that battle. Too many. But we found a story that one man had found an infant on the mountain. That was all. A man and an infant boy. So we searched on. For years we searched, finding other clues, poring over the prophecies. He will be of the ancient blood and raised by the old blood. That was one. There were others. But there are many places where the old blood descended from the...
How's your guys' day going so far?
Then in the two rivers, where the old blood of Manetheren seethes still like a river in flood, in Emond's Field, I found 3 boys whose name days were within weeks of the battle at Dragonmount. And one of them can channel. Do you think Trollocs came after you just because...
There's a Denver in UK.
You are the dragon reborn. Bran's knees gave way. He dropped to a squat, hands slapping the rug to catch himself from falling on his face. The void was gone, the stillness shattered.
That definitely sounds
head,
good.
And they were looking at him. The 3 eyes said,
Haven't had breakfast yet. That's
Their
pretty
faces
much
were
my
serene,
breakfast.
smooth as unruffled ponds. But their eyes did not blink. My father is Tamil Thor, and I was born... They stared at him unmoving. They're lying. I am not what they say. Some way, somehow, they're lying, trying to use me. I will not be used by you. An anchor is not demeaned by being used to hold a boat, the Amyrlin said. You were made for a purpose, Randolph Thor. When the winds of Tarmangaden scour the earth, he will face the shadow and bring forth light again in the world. The prophecies must be fulfilled, or the Dark One will break free and remake the world in his image. The last battle is coming, and you were born to unite mankind and lead them against the Dark One. Balsamon is dead, Bran said hoarsely. The Amyrlin snorted like a stable hand. If you believe that, you are as much a fool as the Domani. Many there believe he is dead, or say they do. But I notice they still won't risk naming him. The Dark One lives, and he is breaking free. You will face the Dark One. It is your destiny. It is your destiny. He had heard that before, in a dream, that had maybe not been entirely a dream. He wondered what the Amyrlin would say if she knew Balsamon had spoken to him in dreams. It's done with. Balsamon is dead. I saw him die. Suddenly it came to him that he was crouching like a toad, huddling under their eyes. He tried to form the void again, but voices whirled through his head, sweeping away every effort. It is your destiny. Babe lying in the snow. You are the dragon reborn. Balsamon is dead. Rand is a good name, Kari. I will not be used. Drawing on his own native stubbornness, he forced himself back upright. Face it on your feet.
Hey, Wicked, how you doing, bro?
The 3 Aes Sedai watched with no expression. What? With an effort, he steadied his voice. What are you going to do to me? Nothing, the Amyrlin said, and he blinked. It was not the answer he had expected, the one he had feared. You say you want to accompany your friend with Ingtar, and you may. I have not marked you out in any way. Some of the sisters may know you are Taviran, but no more. Only we 3 know who you truly are. Your friend Perrin will be brought to me.
I gotta get money for the ticket first.
You may go as you will, without fear that we will set the Red Sisters on you. Who you truly are. Anger flared up in him, hot and corrosive.
Now it's gonna take some saving
he forced it to
because
stay inside, hidden. Why?
the tickets could be around
Must be fulfilled. We let you walk
close
free,
to 600,
knowing what you are, because
and that's
otherwise
round trip.
The world we know will die, and the Dark One will cover the earth with fire and death. Mark
Yeah, it's
me,
definitely hot as fuck
not
here.
all Aes Sedai feel the same. There are some here in Faldara who would strike you down if they knew.
I'm not
the
doing
truth
too
of what you
bad
are,
on Wicked.
and feel no more remorse than for gutting a fish. But then there are men who've no doubt laughed with you, who would do the same if they knew. Have a care, Randolph Thor, dragon reborn. He looked at each of them in turn. prophecies are no part of me. They returned his gaze so calmly it was hard to believe they were trying to convince him he was the most hated, the most feared man in the history of the world. He had gone right through fear and come out the other side in some place cold. Anger was all that kept him warm. They could gentle him or burn him to a crisp where he stood, and he no longer cared. A part of Land's instructions came back to him. Left hand on the hilt, he twisted the sword behind him, catching the scabbard in his right, then bowed, arms straight. By your leave, mother, may I depart this place? I give you leave to go, my son. Straightening, he stood there a moment.
Well, he's not doing too bad. He's at the house
I will
taking
not be
care of
used.
the dogs and the plants.
There was a long silence as he turned and left.
I want to know how
The
big.
silence stretched on in the room after Rand left until it was broken by a long
See,
breath
there's
from
a
the
size
other.
difference in Dobby from the last time I
cannot
saw
make
him.
myself like what we just did, she said. It was necessary.
See how much bigger he's
Did
gotten.
it work, daughters? Moiraine shook her head, just the slightest movement. I do not know, but it was necessary, and is necessary, Varen agreed. She touched her forehead, then peered at the dampness on her fingers. He is strong, and as stubborn as you said, Moiraine. Much stronger than I expected. We may have to gentle him after all before... Her eyes widened. But we cannot, can we? The prophecies. The light forgive us for what we are loosing on the world. The prophecies, Moiraine said, nodding. Afterwards, we will do as we must, as we do now. As we must, the Amyrlin said. Yes, but when he learns to channel, the light help us all. The silence returned. There was a storm coming. Nynaeve felt it. A big storm, worse than she had ever seen. She could listen to the wind and hear what the weather would be. All wisdoms claimed to be able to do that, though many could not. Nynaeve had felt more comfortable with the ability before learning it was a manifestation of the power. Any woman who could listen to the wind could channel, though most were probably, as she had been, unaware of what she was doing, getting it only in fits and starts.
Hell yeah, you
This
have a good
time,
day
though,
too,
something
bro.
was wrong. Outside, the morning sun was a golden ball in a clear blue sky, and birds sang in the gardens, but that was not it. There would have been nothing to listening to the wind if she could not foretell the weather before the signs were visible. There was something wrong with the feeling this time, something not quite the way it usually was. The storm felt distant, too far off for her to feel at all. Yet it felt as if the sky above should have been pouring down rain and snow and hail all at the same time, with winds howling to shake the stones of the keep. And she could feel the good weather too, lasting for days yet, but that was muted under the other. A bluefinch perched in an arrow slit, like a mockery of her weather sense, peering into the hallway. When it saw her, it vanished in a flash of blue and white feathers. She stared at the spot where the bird had been. There is a storm, and there isn't. It means something, but what? Far down the hall, full of women and small children, she saw Rand striding away, his escort of women half running to keep up. Nynaeve nodded firmly. If there was a storm that was not a storm, he would be the center of it. Gathering her skirts, she hurried after him. Women with whom she had grown friendly since coming to Fal Dara tried to speak to her. They knew Rand had come with her and that they were both from the Two Rivers, and they wanted to know why the Amyrlin had summoned him. The Amyrlin's seat. Ice in the pit of her belly, she broke into a run. But before she left the women's apartments, she had lost him around too many corners and beyond too many people. Which way did he go? She asked Nisura. There was no need to say who. She heard Rand's name in the conversation of the other women, clustered around the arched doors. I don't know, Nynaeve. He came out as fast as if he had Heartsbane himself at his heels. As well he might, coming here with a sword at his belt. The Dark One should be the least of his worries about that. What is the world coming to? And him presented to the Amyrlin in her chambers, no less. Tell me, Nynaeve, is he really a prince in your land? The other women stopped talking and leaned closer to listen. Nynaeve was not sure what she answered, something that made them let her go on. She hurried away from the women's apartments, head swiveling at every crossing corridor to look for him, fists clenched. Light, what have they done to him? I should have gotten him away from Moiraine somehow, the light blind her. I'm his wisdom. Are you? A small voice taunted. You've abandoned Emond's Field to fend for itself. Can you still call yourself their wisdom? I did not abandon them, she told herself fiercely. I brought Mavra Malin up from Devon Ride to look after matters till I get back. She can deal well enough with the mayor and the village council, and she gets on well with the women's circle. Mavra will have to get back to her own village. No village can do without its wisdom for long. Nynaeve cringed inside. She had been gone months from Emond's Field. I am the wisdom of Emond's Field, she said aloud. A liveried servant carrying a bolt of cloth blinked at her, then bowed low before scurrying off. By his face, he was eager to be anywhere else. Blushing, Nynaeve looked around to see if anyone had noticed. There were only a few men in the hall, engrossed in their own conversations, and some women in black and gold going about their business, giving her a bow or curtsy as she passed. She had had that argument with herself 100 times before, but this was the first time it had come to talking to herself out loud. She muttered under her breath, then pressed her lips firmly together when she realized what she was doing. She was finally beginning to realize her search was futile when she came on land, his back to her, looking down on the outer courtyard through an arrow slit. The noise from the courtyard was all horses and men, neighing and shouting. So intent was Lan that he did not for once seem to hear her. She hated the fact that she could never sneak up on him, however softly she stepped. She'd been accounted good at woodscraft back in Emond's Field, though it was not a skill in which many women took any interest. She stopped in her tracks, pressing her hands to her stomach to quiet a flutter. I ought to dose myself with rannel and sheep's tongue root, she thought sourly. It was the mixture she gave anyone who moped about and claimed they were sick or behaved like a goose. Rannel and sheep's tongue root would perk you up a little and did no harm, but mainly it tasted horrible, and the taste lasted all day. It was a perfect cure for acting the fool. Safe from his eyes, she studied the length of him, leaning against the stone and fingering his chin as he studied what was going on below. He's too tall, for one thing, and old enough to be my father for another. A man with a face like that would have to be cruel. No, he's not that. Never that. And he was a king. His land was destroyed while he was a child, and he would not claim a crown, but he was a king for that. What would a king want with a village woman? He's a warder, too, bonded to Moiraine. She has his loyalty to death and ties closer than any lover, and she has him. She has everything I want. The light burn her. He turned from the arrow slit, and she whirled to go. Nynaeve. His voice caught and held her like a noose. I wanted to speak to you alone. You always seem to be in the women's apartments, or in company. It took an effort to face him, but she was sure her features were calm when she looked up at him. I'm looking for Rand. She was not bound to admit to avoiding him. We said all we need to say long ago, you and I. I shamed myself, which I will not do again, and you told me to go away. I never said... He took a deep breath. I told you I had nothing to offer for bride price but widow's clothes. Not a gift any man could give a woman. Not a man who can call himself a man. I understand, she said coolly. In any case, a king does not give gifts to village women, and this village woman would not take them. Have you seen Rand? I need to talk to him. He was to see the Amyrlin. Do you know what she wanted with him? His eyes blazed like blue ice in the sun. She stiffened her legs to keep from stepping back, and met him glare for glare. The Dark One take Rand al'Thor and the Amyrlin seat both, he grated, pressing something into her hand. I will make you a gift, and you will take it if I have to chain it around your neck. She pulled her eyes away from his. He had a stare like a blue-eyed hawk when he was angry. In her hand was a signet ring, heavy gold and worn with age, almost large enough for both her thumbs to fit through. On it a crane flew above a lance and crown, all carefully wrought in detail. Her breath caught. The ring of Malkieri kings. Forgetting to glare, she lifted her face. I cannot take this, Lan. He shrugged in an offhand way. It is nothing. Old and useless now. But there are those who would know it when they saw it. Show that and you will have guest right, and help if you need it, from any lord in the borderlands. Show it to a warder and he will give aid, or carry a message to me. Send it to me, or a message marked with it, and I will come to you without delay and without fail. This I swear. Her vision blurred at the edges. If I cry now, I will kill myself. I can't. I do not want a gift from you, Al-Lan Mandragoran. Here, take it. He fended off her attempts to give the ring back to him. His hand enveloped hers, gentle but firm as a shackle. Then take it for my sake, as a favor to me. Or throw it away, if it displeases you. I've no better use for it. He brushed her cheek with a finger, and she gave a start. I must go now, Nynaeve Mashiara. The Amerlin wishes to leave before midday, and there is much yet to be done. Perhaps we will have time to talk on the journey to Tar Valon. He turned and was gone, striding down the hall. Nynaeve touched her cheek. She could still feel where he had touched her. Mashiara, beloved of heart and soul, it meant, but a love lost, too. Lost beyond regaining. Fool woman. Stop acting like a girl with her hair still not braided. It's no use letting him make you feel. Clutching the ring tightly, she turned around and jumped when she found herself face to face with Marina. How long have you been there? She demanded. Not long enough to hear anything I should not have. The Aes Sedai replied.
Hey, old man Dutch, how you doing?
We will be leaving soon. I heard that. You must see to your packing. Leaving? It had not penetrated when Lan said it. I'll have to say goodbye to the boys, she muttered, then gave Moiraine a sharp look. What have you done to Rand? He was taken to the Amerlin. Why? Did you tell her about... She could not say it. He was from her own village, and she was just enough older than he to have looked after him a time or two when he was little, but she could not even think about what he had become without her stomach twisting. The Amerlin will be seeing all three, Nynaeve. Ta'Viren are not so common that she would miss the chance to see three together in one place. Perhaps she will give them a few words of encouragement, since they are riding with Ingtar to hunt those who stole the horn. They will be leaving about the time we do, so you had better hurry with any farewells. Nynaeve dashed to the nearest arrow slit and peered down at the outer courtyard. Horses were everywhere, pack animals and saddle horses, and men hurrying about them, calling to each other. The only clear space was where the Amerlin's palanquin stood, its paired horses waiting patiently without any attendants. Some of the warders were out there looking over their mounts, and on the other side of the courtyard, Ingtar stood with a knot of Shinarans around him in armor. Sometimes a warder or one of Ingtar's men crossed the paving stones to exchange a word. I should have gotten the boys away from you, she said, still looking out. Egwene, too, if I could do it without killing her. Why did she have to be born with this cursed ability? I should have taken them back home. They are more than old enough to be off apron strings, Moiraine said dryly. And you know very well why you could never do that. For one of them, at least. Besides, it would mean leaving Egwene to go to Tar Valon alone. Or have you decided to forego Tar Valon yourself? If your own use of the power is not schooled, you will never be able to use it against me. Nynaeve spun to face the Aes Sedai, her jaw dropping. She could not help it. I don't know what you are talking about. Did you think I did not know, child? Well, as you wish it. I take it that you are coming to Tar Valon? Yes, I thought so. Nynaeve wanted to hit her, to knock away the brief smile that flashed across the Aes Sedai's face. Aes Sedai had not been able to wield power openly since the breaking, much less the One Power, but they plotted and manipulated, pulled strings like puppet masters, used thrones and nations like stones on a stones board. She wants to use me, too, somehow. If a king or a queen, why not a wisdom? Just the way she's using Rand. I'm no child, Aes Sedai. What are you doing with Rand now? Have you not used him enough? I don't know why you have not had him gentled. Now the Amyrlin's here with all those other Aes Sedai, but you must have a reason. It must be some plot you're hatching. If the Amyrlin knew what you were up to, I wager she'd... Moiraine cut her off. What possible interest could the Amyrlin have in a shepherd? Of course, if he were brought to her attention in the wrong way, he might be gentled or even killed. He is what he is, after all. And there is considerable anger.
Alright, we'll probably call it end to this
Everyone
life
is looking
right
for
now.
whom to blame.
I might get
The
on
Aes
later
Sedai
tonight.
felt silent and let the silence stretch.
Well, I
Nynaeve
think
stared
everyone
at her,
stopping by,
grinding
and
her teeth.
everyone keeps stopping by.
Yes, Moiraine said finally.
Appreciate everyone's
Much better
love
to
and
let a
support.
sleeping lion
Till
sleep.
next time, everyone. Stay
You see
safe.
your